Evan Cole woke up before the station lights shifted from night blue to morning white. That was normal for him. Humans on the frontier often slept lightly. Space stations never truly rested. There was always a hum in the walls, a vibration in the floor, a reminder that metal and energy were the only things keeping life alive. He sat up on his narrow bed and touched his face. His beard was itchy again. Evan sighed quietly. He had been growing it for months. Not by choice, really. Water on the station was limited. Personal grooming was considered wasteful by most species. Evan had learned to adapt. Humans always did. But the itch had become unbearable. His skin felt tight, irritated, uncomfortable. Small problems grew big when ignored. He stood, crossed the small room, and opened a hidden panel behind a storage unit. Inside was a small mirror and a compact electric shaver he had brought from Earth years ago. He looked at his reflection. Brown eyes, tired but steady. Beard rough and uneven. "Just this once," he muttered. The shaver buzzed softly as he turned it on. Evan carefully moved it along his jaw. Hair fell into the sink in dark curls. His skin appeared smooth beneath, pale compared to the beard shadow he was used to. He felt relief almost instantly. The itch faded. His face felt clean, lighter, more like himself. He finished quickly, wiped his face, and shut the panel. To Evan it meant nothing. A simple habit, a personal comfort. He had no idea it was a death sentence. When Evan stepped into the main corridor, the station was already awake. Tall figures moved slowly through the wide hall. The Keller dominated this section of the station. They were massive, towering over humans by more than a head. Their bodies were thick, covered in long, braided strands of silver-black hair. Their faces were narrow, eyes dark and unblinking. The hair was not decoration. It was identity, status, faith. Evan walked forward, boots echoing softly. The first Keller froze, then another stopped. Conversation died instantly. The low rumble of alien voices cut off mid-sound. A heavy silence fell, sharp and unnatural. Evan slowed. He looked around, confused. Every eye was on him. Keller stared as if they had seen a ghost. Some stepped back. Others tightened their grip on weapons they always carried but rarely raised. "What?" Evan asked, uneasy. No one answered. A young Keller worker dropped the crate he was holding. It hit the floor with a loud clang. He did not move to pick it up. He was staring at Evan's face, eyes wide with horror. Whispers began, low and frantic. Evan did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Fear, shock, disbelief. A Keller guard stepped forward. His voice was deep, shaking with restrained anger. "What have you done to yourself, human?" Evan blinked. "I shaved." The word echoed strangely in the silent hall. The guard recoiled as if struck. "You have cut your living mark," the guard said. "You have removed what you were born to carry." Evan felt his stomach twist. "It's just hair," he said carefully. "It grows back." That was the wrong thing to say. The guard's eyes burned. Other Keller moved closer, forming a loose circle. Evan could feel the danger now. His instincts screamed. Humans had survived worse situations by reading rooms like this. This was bad. "You have defiled yourself," the guard growled. "Among us, such an act is madness, dishonor, a challenge to life itself." Evan raised his hand slowly. "I didn't know. No one told me." Silence. The words snapped like metal. Then another voice cut through the tension. "Stand down." The Keller parted. She stepped forward, Larasha. She was taller than most of her kind. Her hair fell in thick, ceremonial strands down her back, woven with faint silver markings that showed her rank as an observer. She was assigned to watch humans, to study them, not to interfere. Her gaze locked onto Evan's face. She did not look angry. She looked focused. Her eyes traced his skin slowly, following the sharp line of his jaw, the exposed throat, the unfamiliar smoothness where hair should have been. Her breathing changed slightly. Only someone trained to watch would notice. "This human is under observation," Larasha said calmly. No action is to be taken without council approval. The guards hesitated. Orders were orders. Slowly, weapons lowered. Evan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Larasha turned to him. Up close, she was overwhelming. Her presence felt heavy like gravity. "Return to your quarters," she said. "Do not provoke further attention." Evan nodded. "Thank you." She did not respond. She watched him walk away, eyes never leaving his bare face. For the first time in her life, Larasha felt uncertainty. Among the Keller, hair was life. It was never cut. To remove it was to reject one's ancestors, to reject existence itself. It was said that only the insane or the condemned were shaved before death. Yet the human walked calmly. His posture was straight, his heart rate steady. There was no shame in him, no fear. Only confusion. That disturbed her more than rage would have. Throughout the station, word spread like fire through dry grass. The human cut himself by choice. Some said it was a threat. Others claimed humans were ritual beings who destroyed parts of themselves to grow stronger. A few whispered that it was a sickness that could spread. Larasha retreated to her observation chamber, but her mind stayed in the corridor. She replayed the moment again and again. The smooth skin, the way light reflected differently on his face, the way he met her gaze without lowering his eyes. She accessed the human database, grooming practices, cultural habits, personal choice, identity expression, choice. The word had no true translation in Keller language. Later that cycle, Evan sat alone in his quarters. His door chimed softly. "Yes," he called. The door slid open. Larasha filled the doorway. Evan stood slowly. "Is something wrong?" Her eyes flicked once to his face again. Just once, but it was enough. "You violated no written law," she said, "but you violated belief." "I didn't mean to," Evan replied. "If I had known—" "That is irrelevant," she interrupted. "Intent does not change outcome." She stepped closer. The air felt thicker. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Evan hesitated, then shrugged slightly. "Because it was uncomfortable." "Because I wanted to, because it's my face." Larasha absorbed his words in silence. "You would risk death," she said slowly, "for comfort." "For choice," Evan corrected gently. Something shifted behind her eyes. She turned abruptly. "You will be summoned," she said. "Prepare yourself." Then she left. Evan sank back onto his bed, heart pounding. He touched his smooth jaw again. It still felt right. Even now. Outside, unseen, Larasha paused in the corridor. Her hand rose unconsciously, brushing against her own long, untouched hair. For the first time in her long life, she wondered what it would feel like to change, and why the thought terrified her. The summons came sooner than Evan expected. Station lights shifted to a harsh white as security drones hovered outside his door. They did not touch him. They did not need to. The message was clear. He was expected to follow. Evan changed into his work uniform slowly. His hands were steady, but his thoughts were not. Humans were good at pretending calm. Inside, he was measuring time, exits, risks. He knew the Keller did not make threats lightly. What frightened him most was not their anger, but their certainty. As he stepped into the corridor, other species avoided his gaze. Small avian traders flattened their feathers. Scaled merchants turned their backs. Even humans kept distance. No one wanted to be associated with the shaved man. Only one presence followed him openly. Larasha walked several steps behind, silent and watchful. They passed into the council sector, a place Evan had only seen once before. The chamber doors opened slowly, revealing a wide circular hall carved from dark alloy. Symbols were etched into the walls, depicting ancient Keller forms with long, flowing hair stretching down like roots into the stone. Evan was led to the center. The council members sat high above, massive forms resting on raised platforms. Their hair was longer than any Evan had seen, braided with metal and bone. Their eyes fixed on him with cold intensity. "You stand accused," one of them said, voice echoing, "of rejecting the form you were given." Evan swallowed. "I didn't reject anything, I just—" Silence, another voice thundered. You removed living identity. Explain. Evan forced himself to breathe. For humans, hair is not identity, it's just hair. We cut it, grow it, change it. It doesn't mean disrespect. Murmurs spread through the chamber. One council member leaned forward. Change is decay, he said. Stability is survival. Larasha shifted slightly. It was almost invisible, but Evan noticed. With respect, Evan said carefully, humans survive because we change, because we adapt when things are uncomfortable or wrong. The word uncomfortable caused a ripple of quiet disbelief. To endure discomfort is honor, the council replied. To humans, Evan said, choosing comfort is also honor. It means we value life while we have it. The council fell silent. Larasha felt her chest tighten. She had studied humans for years. She knew their words. But hearing them spoken here without fear changed them. One council member turned his gaze to her. Observer Larasha, you watched this human, you delayed action. Explain. Every eye moved to her. She straightened. I observed no aggression, no challenge. Only a personal act without intent to offend. Intent is meaningless, the council replied. Then context must matter, Larasha said. Gasps echoed. Observers did not argue. They recorded. This human species treats form as flexible, she continued slowly. They modify themselves for survival, health, and expression. It is not decay, it is strategy. The word strategy caused hesitation. Evan glanced at her, surprised. You risk much, the council said. I fulfill my duty, Larasha replied, to understand. The chamber fell quiet again. Finally, the council spoke. The human will remain confined until judgment. Observer Larasha is dismissed. Security drones moved in. Evan was escorted away. His confinement was not violent, but it was absolute. His room was sealed. Communication limited. Food delivered without contact. Hours passed. Then cycles. Evan spent the time thinking about Earth, about how strange it was that something so small could become so dangerous, about how often humans had faced death for being different. He touched his face often, not out of fear, out of grounding. It reminded him who he was. Meanwhile, Larasha was restless. She returned to her chamber but could not focus. Data scrolled past her eyes without meaning. Her thoughts kept returning to the human's calm voice. His refusal to apologize for existing differently. She accessed deeper archives, forbidden ones, records of ancient Keller history. She found something unexpected. Long ago, before the Keller Dominion, there were sects. Some believed hair could be altered in times of loss or rebirth. Those sects were erased, their beliefs labeled heresy, their history buried. Change had once existed. The realization shook her. Later, she requested permission to observe the human again. The request was denied. So she went anyway. Using observer clearance, she entered the holding sector. The guards hesitated but allowed her through. No one liked to question an observer too closely. Evan looked up as she entered. Back again? Yes, she said. Am I dead yet? Not yet. He smiled faintly. That's good. She studied his face openly now. No shame, no fear. The smooth skin no longer seemed wrong, it seemed intentional. Do you regret it? She asked. No, Evan said without hesitation. I regret that it hurts others. But I don't regret being myself. Larasha felt something twist inside her. Among her people, regret was expected. Submission was survival. You know they may kill you, she said. I know, Evan replied. But if I beg, if I pretend I'm wrong for existing, then I'm already gone. Silence filled the room. You humans are dangerous, she said softly. He laughed quietly. We hear that a lot. She left soon after, but the weight followed her. The next cycle, the station began to change. Human engineers delayed maintenance, not in protest but in confusion. They did not know whether their presence was still welcome. Medical staff hesitated to treat Keller patients, unsure if they were allowed near the council chambers. Systems slowed, not enough to cause panic, enough to be noticed. The council noticed. They summoned reports. Analysts spoke of declining efficiency, of growing unease among non-Keller species, and of something else. Footage of Evan's trial had spread. Across the station, beings watched the human stand alone, unarmed, unashamed. They saw a species that refused to beg. Larasha watched the same footage again alone. She stood before a mirror in her chamber. Her hair fell heavy down her back, untouched since birth. Her hand rose, she stopped. Fear flooded her, not of punishment, of possibility. For the first time, she understood what the human meant by choice. And for the first time, she wondered which was more dangerous, changing, or never changing at all. The council did not delay any longer. The judgment cycle was announced across the station in the neutral tone used for weather changes and system updates. To the Keller, this decision was as natural as gravity. To everyone else, it felt like a tightening noose. Evan was escorted once more into the council chamber. This time there were no whispers. The silence was heavier, filled with expectation. The chamber was full. Representatives from other species stood at the edges, invited not to speak but to witness. Witnesses made executions permanent. Evan walked to the center alone. His hands were not bound. They did not need to be. The Keller believed restraint of the body was meaningless if the mind had already failed. Larasha stood among the observers, her posture rigid. She had not slept. Her thoughts had moved in endless circles, all of them leading back to the same truth she could not escape. This was wrong. The council began. The human Evan Cole, the lead counselor said, has violated the natural order by removing his living mark. He has shown no remorse. No attempt to restore honor. Therefore, under Dominion law, he is unfit to remain among us. Evan felt the words settle like cold metal. What is the sentence? He asked calmly. The counselor's eyes narrowed. Removal. The word echoed through the chamber. Larasha felt a sharp pain in her chest. She had known this was coming. Knowing did not make it easier. Before judgment is finalized, another counselor said, the human may speak one final time. All eyes turned to Evan. He looked around the chamber. He saw fear, curiosity, quiet hope from beings who had never dared speak before. Humans at the edges watched him with tight expressions. They knew what this moment meant, not just for him, but for all of them. Evan lifted his chin. I won't beg, he said. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. I won't pretend I did something wrong just to live longer, he continued. I shaved my face because it was my choice. Humans change, we always have, that's how we survive. You survive by obedience, the council replied. No, Evan said, we survive by helping each other. By adapting when the world tells us to break. He looked directly at the council. If you kill me for that, he said quietly, then you prove my point. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Larasha felt her control slipping. Observers were not meant to interfere. That rule had defined her entire existence, but rules were only stable until reality challenged them. And reality was standing in the center of the room, unashamed. She stepped forward. Gasps echoed. Observer Larasha, the council said sharply, return to your position. I cannot, she replied. Her voice did not shake. You have exceeded your authority, the council warned. I have fulfilled it, she said. I observed, I learned, and I reached a conclusion. The chamber erupted in noise. Larasha raised her voice. You fear change because it reminds you that we once changed too, she said. You buried that history. You erased those who believed form could evolve, but truth does not stay buried forever. The council rose to their feet. This is heresy, one roared. This is reality, Larasha replied. Humans do not weaken themselves by choice. They strengthen their minds. They endure loss, pain, and fear because they believe life is worth shaping. She turned slightly, gesturing to Evan. He stands without weapons, without allies. And yet he does not kneel. That is not madness. That is strength. Security moved. Evan took a step forward. If you punish her for speaking, you prove that this was never about law, only control. The council hesitated. Outside the chamber, systems flickered. Power fluctuations spread through non-critical sectors, doors delayed, environmental systems adjusted slightly off balance. Nothing dangerous, nothing violent, but intentional. Human engineers across the station had made a decision, not spoken, not planned, a shared understanding. They would not sabotage, they would not rebel, they would simply stop holding everything together. The station began to feel the absence of human hands. Medical alerts increased, trade routes delayed, communication arrays drifted out of perfect alignment. The council received reports in real time. "This is coercion," one counselor snarled. "No," Larasha said, "this is consequence." The lead counselor stared at Evan. "Call them off." Evan shook his head. "I didn't ask them to do anything." Humans act when they believe something matters. Silence stretched. Then something unexpected happened. A delegate from a smaller species stepped forward, trembling but determined. "We support the human," she said. "We have lived under rules that were never ours. If choice is a crime, then we are all guilty." Another voice joined. "And we have seen humans die to save others," a scaled being said. "They do not fear change, they fear becoming nothing." The chamber filled with voices, not shouting, agreeing. The council had never faced this before. Larasha felt the shift. The balance of power, long frozen, was cracking. The lead counselor lowered his head slightly. "The sentence is suspended," he said at last, "pending reassessment." Evan exhaled slowly. Security withdrew. The chamber slowly emptied, buzzing with quiet conversation. Something had changed, it could not be undone. Later, Evan was returned to his quarters, not confined, not free, waiting. Larasha stood alone in her chamber again. She faced the mirror. Her reflection stared back unchanged, perfectly obedient. Her hands rose. This time she did not stop. She reached for a ceremonial blade, one she had never used. Her hands were steady. With one smooth motion she cut a single strand of her hair. It fell silently to the floor. Her breath caught not in pain but in release. She stared at the fallen strand. Nothing broke. The station did not collapse. She was still alive. And for the first time she felt truly awake. The station did not return to normal after the suspended sentence. Nothing exploded. No alarm screamed. That was the problem. Things simply stopped fitting together the way they used to. Human technicians continued their work, but only within their assigned duties. They followed written orders exactly. No adjustments, no quiet fixes. No personal effort to keep aging systems alive. The station had relied on human flexibility for years without realizing it. Now that flexibility was gone. Corridors grew colder in some sectors, warmer in others. Lighting cycles drifted out of sync. Transport schedules slipped. Small delays piled into larger ones. The Keller noticed. They were not used to systems failing slowly. Their culture believed in permanence. If something was built correctly, it lasted. If it failed, someone had broken a rule. They could not accept that the rules themselves were no longer enough. Evan was allowed to move freely again, but he was never alone. Guards followed at a distance, not close enough to provoke, not far enough to trust. Other humans watched him with a mix of pride and fear. He had become a symbol without choosing to be one. That frightened him more than the council ever had. He returned to his workstation in engineering. The familiar hum of machines steadied him. Tools made sense. Problems had causes. Causes had solutions. Larasha came to him on the third cycle after the suspension. She did not announce herself. She simply stood nearby until he noticed. Evan looked up and froze. Her hair was still long, still braided, but one braid was shorter, uneven. The cut was deliberate, not hidden. "You did it," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "That's dangerous." "So were you," she said, "before you showed me it was possible." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the machine's struggle to maintain balance. "The council is afraid," Evan said. "They should be," Larasha answered. "They have confused control with strength for too long." They won't let this go, he warned. I know. Across the station, the council argued. Some demanded immediate enforcement of law, others urged patience. The Dominion had never faced resistance without violence. This resistance was quiet, calm. It did not give them an enemy to strike. One counselor spoke what many feared. If humans withdraw entirely, this station will fail within cycles. Another hissed. Then we replace them. With whom, came the reply, no other species adapts fast enough. The truth settled heavily. Humans were not the strongest, not the largest, not the longest-lived. They were necessary. That realization felt like an insult. The council made a decision. An emergency decree was issued. All personal modifications among non-Keller species were to be regulated. Grooming, clothing, body expression, everything would require approval. The council believed tightening control would restore order. The decree spread quickly and broke something fragile. Humans read it in silence. Other species felt the pressure tighten around their lives. What had begun as one human's choice now touched everyone. Evan read the decree twice. This will make it worse, he said. Yes, Larasha replied. But they do not know another response. That night something changed. Not organized, not announced. People gathered. Humans in work uniforms, traders, medics, pilots, beings of different shapes and colors all standing together in a wide maintenance bay. No banners, no weapons. Just presence. Evan stood at the edge, unsure. Larasha stood beside him, visible to all. A murmur spread when others noticed her altered braid. She cut it. She chose. She's Keller. A human medic stepped forward. We're not here to fight, she said. We're here to be seen. One by one, humans stepped forward. Some removed gloves. Others loosened uniform collars. Small signs of individuality long suppressed. Then others followed. A scaled trader adjusted the markings on his crest. An avian folded her wings in a way her species reserved for mourning and rebirth. No laws were broken, only expectations. Security arrived but did nothing. There were too many, and nothing to arrest. The council watched through feeds. This is defiance, one said. This is unity, another replied, uncertain. Larasha felt something she had never felt before, belonging. The next cycle the council summoned Evan and Larasha together. This time the chamber felt different, smaller, less absolute. You have caused instability, the lead counselor said. We revealed it, Evan replied. You encourage disorder. We encourage choice, Larasha said calmly. The counselor's gaze hardened. You forget your place. No, Larasha said. I finally understand it. She stepped forward unafraid. You built an empire that survives by standing still. Humans survive by moving. You use them, yet you fear what makes them human. Silence followed. What do you want? The council asked at last. Evan looked around the chamber. Nothing, he said. That's the point. We want the freedom to choose without asking permission to exist. The council withdrew to deliberate. Hours passed. Systems continued to degrade, not dangerously but noticeably. The station felt strained, like a held breath. Finally, the council returned. The decree is rescinded, the lead counselor said stiffly. Personal customs of non-Keller species will not be regulated. A wave of relief moved through the chamber. But, the council continued, observer Larasha is stripped of rank. She is no longer protected by Dominion law. The cost landed hard. Evan turned sharply. No, Larasha did not move. She had expected this. I accept, she said. The council rose and left. Just like that it was over, or so it seemed. Larasha stood alone in the chamber, rankless. Vulnerable, Evan stepped beside her. You don't have to stay, he said. You could leave the station. And go where? She asked softly. I no longer belong to them. He hesitated. You belong here, he said, with us. She looked at him, really looked, at his bare face. At the human who had never asked to lead and yet had changed everything. Then I choose to stay, she said. The word felt powerful on her tongue. Choice. Across the station, Systems slowly stabilized, not because orders were given, but because humans returned to what they did best. They adapted, and the Keller learned, too late to stop it, that the most dangerous thing humans ever brought to the stars was not weapons. It was the courage to live openly, and to invite others to do the same. Evan woke early, long before the station lights shifted into morning brightness. He could hear the soft hum of machinery, a rhythm that had become almost like a heartbeat. Today felt different, though. There was no tension pressing in from the council, no guards following closely behind. The quiet of freedom was strange, almost alien. He walked to the small mirror in his quarters, touching the smooth skin of his face. The beard had long been gone, replaced with a clean surface that reflected a human who had survived impossible odds. A small smile crossed his lips. Even now, he marveled at how something as simple as shaving could spark such chaos. Outside, the station was alive in a new way. Humans moved freely, still cautious but confident. The maintenance bays hummed with activity. Engineers worked not just because they had to, but because they chose to. Small modifications, small improvements, things that had been invisible for months, began to appear across the station. Energy flows stabilized, and transport schedules returned to precision. Humanity was back in its element. Larasha moved through the corridors beside him. She no longer wore the heavy ceremonial braid that had defined her as an observer. The single-cut strand from before had been the start of something new. Her long hair now flowed freely, unbound, untethered by rules she had once obeyed blindly. She had chosen this, and it felt empowering. The way she walked, confident and deliberate, mirrored Evan's calm defiance. "You've changed the station," she said softly, almost to herself. "No," Evan replied, glancing around. "We just reminded it how to work." They passed a group of human engineers who looked up and smiled. They did not nod in fear or deference. They simply acknowledged one of their own. Evan felt warmth spread in his chest. Humans had never needed recognition to act. They needed only trust, and now, after the trial, they had it. As they reached the main observation deck, the council's chambers loomed ahead. No one guarded it. No one stopped them. The Keller had learned a lesson in patience, one that came at the cost of arrogance. Power without understanding had proved useless. Inside the chamber, the council waited, seated stiffly but noticeably subdued. Their hair flowed long and perfect, untouched. They had regained order in the hall, but the lesson lingered like a shadow. The lead counselor spoke first. "Evan Cole, observer Larasha, you have proven difficult to contain." Evan's lips twitched with humor. "We never tried to be contained." The counselor's eyes flicked to Larasha. "And you, former observer, have overstepped your authority." "I have observed," she said. "I have spoken, I have learned. That is all any observer can do." A murmur passed through the chamber. Some Keller shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had been trained to follow, to obey, to suppress doubt. Yet here was a human, and one of their own, rankless, exposed, who had altered the balance without violence. Evan stepped forward. "All we wanted was to exist, to live, to make choices for ourselves. That isn't chaos, it's life." A younger counselor, one who had watched the events unfold more closely than the others, nodded slowly. "Perhaps we have underestimated the resilience of humans," he admitted quietly. The lead counselor's eyes narrowed, but he did not contradict. Instead, he rose. "Very well. The decrees restricting personal choice among non-Keller species are rescinded. The station will function under the natural flow of its inhabitants, not the rigidity of law alone." The chamber exhaled as one. Rules had been amended not out of mercy, but necessity. Survival had dictated compromise. Evan looked at Larasha. "You could leave now," he said. "You don't belong to them anymore." She considered him, her gaze steady. "And go where? Back to a world that treats my kind like tools? No, I belong here now." He raised an eyebrow. "Among humans. Among humans who respect choice," she said simply. "Yes." The weight of her words settled. She was not just choosing to stay with him, she was choosing freedom. She was choosing a new life built not on rules but on understanding. The next days passed with quiet transformation. Humans took back their stations fully. Small acts of ingenuity returned life to old systems. They improved machinery, modified schedules, and repaired worn areas without anyone commanding them. Their presence reminded everyone, Keller included, that adaptability was strength. Evan returned to his quarters one evening and sat by the small window overlooking the docking bay. Ships glided in silence, lights reflecting off polished metal hulls. He could see La Rasha moving among the humans, helping an engineer adjust a complex tool. She had learned quickly, but she moved differently now. There was an ease to her steps, a quiet pride in what she accomplished. Humans and non-humans alike paused as they crossed paths with her. Some offered subtle gestures of respect, while others simply nodded. She no longer needed approval. Her authority came from choice, just as Evans had. He thought back to the first morning he shaved. A small human habit that had nearly cost him his life. And yet it had sparked something much greater. A lesson the Dominion could not teach. That strength was not just obedience, nor fear, nor power. Strength was choice. Courage was living openly. Humanity had reminded them of that truth. Evan rose and walked to her. "You're settling in," he said. "Yes," she replied, adjusting her loose hair, "and learning more than I expected about humans." "Not just humans," he said with a small smile. "About life, about freedom." They stood side by side, watching as the station pulsed with quiet life. Systems moved, people worked, and a new balance had been established, not through fear or law or domination, but through understanding and respect. Across the corridors, Keller guards paused in their routine, observing humans without suspicion. Traders and engineers alike navigated spaces once controlled tightly, now freer than they had been in decades. Even the council seemed less rigid. Not entirely changed, but aware that the old ways could not contain the new reality. Evan turned to Larasha. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had begged?" She laughed softly. "Yes, I probably would have stayed obedient, following orders without question. And the station would have never learned what humans are capable of." "I think I like this version better," he said. The two of them walked back through the corridors together, blending into the rhythm of the station. They passed humans repairing machinery, non-humans adjusting schedules, and species of all kinds learning to work together without fear. The simple act of living, of choosing, had changed everything. Evan reached his quarters and paused. He touched his smooth face once more. The memory of fear, of silence, of judgment lingered briefly. Then it faded. That fear belonged to another cycle, another time. He was alive. He had chosen. And through that choice, he had reminded everyone around him what it meant to be human. Larasha joined him at the door. "Shall we?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. They stepped out into the station together, not as prisoner and observer, but as two beings who had changed their world through courage, calm, and the simple act of being themselves. From that day forward, no one dared underestimate humans, not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the largest, but because they were the only species that could stand alone, face judgment, and still remain themselves. Their courage was quiet, their strength unyielding, and their choice, the simple human act of choosing, was more powerful than any weapon the galaxy had ever known. The station thrived in its new rhythm. Humans worked, adapted, and improved. Non-humans learned to respect freedom. Larasha learned to live beyond rules, guided by understanding rather than obedience. And Evan, once just another engineer, became a symbol, not because he sought glory, but because he had simply lived as he was meant to live. In the quiet moments, when the station's hum matched the rhythm of life itself, Evan would smile and touch his jaw, remembering the first morning he had shaved. A simple human habit had sparked change across the stars. and humanity had reminded the galaxy that true power was not domination. It was courage, it was choice, and it was the unbreakable will to live freely, no matter the cost. For the first time in decades, the Dominion and the station felt alive. Not because rules had been enforced, but because freedom had been embraced. And for Evan and Laurasha, that freedom was just the beginning.